All right, welcome in to the Go 24/7 podcast. I am Glenn West. That is Sonny Ship. We've got meeting 110, I believe, between LSU and Ole Miss. One of the oldest football games going back to the early 1900s, and this should be another pretty exciting installment. We're going to break it all down for you here today and get you on your way. But before we do all that, we'd just like to remind you guys to hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you're leaving comments and things of that nature, and anything you can help us out with on YouTube, and certainly wherever you're listening to your podcast, whether it's on Spotify or Apple, wherever you may get it. Always helps us out with the algorithms as we try to grow this thing out and reach as many LSU fans as possible. With that being said, Sonny, we've got another great matchup here, another great start to the SEC. Really, the kind of the heart of the SEC schedule now for LSU. This top 15 matchup between number 4 LSU and number 13 Ole Miss. I'll kind of leave this open-ended. I'm sure we're going to touch on both offense and defense here, but just big bullet point key to the game. What do you think it's going to be for LSU in this one? And then I can bounce off of it and we can go back and forth on what kind of our bigger keys to the game are for this Tigers team.
Yeah, big game, man. Tiger fans all over waking up this morning screaming, "Go to hell, Ole Miss!" Probably got their
There you go.
dogs running around and playing the fight song here. Big game, man. Just a big game, and having to go on the road to number 11 ranked team in the country. Hard to believe that when we go back and we look at this, that you're 5 weeks into the season, and
Yeah.
you're already making your second road trip to you know basically a top 10 ranked team when you play them, when you count the Clemson game. But I think going into this one, probably the biggest overall key for me is that LSU's defense has to limit the chunk plays by Ole Miss's running game. And they have to make, if Trinidad Chambliss and Austin Simmons is going to beat you, then you have to make them beat you attacking the best part of your defense. And I think that's the secondary.
Yeah.
And so, and that's it for me. And then if you flip it over to the other side of the ball, one key on that side for the offense is that you got to expand on what you saw last week. You got to go with what your strength is. Your strength right now is not running the football. You need to run the football some, but your strength is that explosive passing game. And it's going to take more than 20 points, like Brian Kelly said. After the Louisiana Tech game, this is that game to where it's going to take more than 20 points, in my opinion. But if LSU can do those two things right there, I feel pretty good about them being able to get out of Oxford with a I don't want to say a convincing victory, but an impressive victory.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think for me, and I wrote about this in our previewing predictions piece, just kind of our keys to the game. I really did stick heavy with the run and on both sides, like on defense and on offense. I think it's going to be extremely important for LSU's defense to be able to close gaps and tackle in space is a big part of this thing as well. The safeties and the linebackers, I think, have been really extraordinary of doing that this year. There haven't been a ton of those, missed opportunities, those whiff tackles that we saw so much the last couple of years with LSU's defense. Halsey and Cooley are really good tacklers in space. Obviously, the Weeks brothers, I think, have improved in that area quite a bit. They've been in the right positions too from a run game perspective. That's the other thing is that they haven't been moved out of their spots or moved out of positioning to where they can't go make those plays in the run game. And so I think, look, Ole Miss, they average 218, I believe, yards a game on the ground. If you're able to at least take away one of those things, whether it's the quarterback run, the running back run with what they like to do, I think that they have a real opportunity here to be able to slow this offense down a little bit, and make it to where you don't have to score 35 points to win this game, but you still are able to put the clamps down a little bit and hold them into that 23-24 kind of range. Like I think that's very possible for this LSU defense to do. And the other thing defensively is like I think I don't know when it will happen, but I feel like there has to be a big turnover in this game for the LSU defense. I feel like there has to be one of those interceptions Ole Miss side of the field where the offense gets, an extra possession where they can have a shorter field to work with and maybe get an extra touchdown where you don't really see it coming kind of thing. Like I think that could potentially, be a huge, huge swing for LSU if they're able to go out and do that. And they were able to really get after DJ Lagway a couple weeks ago and make him uncomfortable in the pocket. I still think we haven't seen enough of Chambliss against really good defenses to really trust that he's going to be able to throw the ball against LSU defensively. Like I think he's got shown some really good tape here the last couple weeks, but this is a different animal. Like as much as people are saying LSU's defense hadn't faced an offense like this yet this season, I think LSU's or Ole Miss's offense hasn't faced a defense like LSU's either, and so I think there's going to be some real back and forth there. I'm extremely excited to see kind of what Blake Baker and Lane Kiffin, that back and forth, that chess match, going back and forth with each other. Two very aggressive styles of offense and defense. How those two things, collide, and which one kind of makes the bigger plays when the bigger plays are needed. That's something that Brian Kelly has talked a lot about in his last couple of years with this program. Is just which team's going to make the big play when their best is needed, kind of thing. And I think that's going to be really up to the defense to make those kinds of plays. Offensively, though, I really think the run game is going to be extremely important here for LSU. I think you can set up the run game with the pass, and to your point, I think they're going to have to, like you said, be a little bit more perimeter oriented with their passing game and looking downfield and making sure that Garrett Nussmeier is, spreading the ball around, putting the ball in good positions for his guys to go make plays. But I think by doing that, and if LSU has success with that, Ole Miss won't be able to stack the box. They won't be able to put too many guys in there to really slow that run game down. And I really liked what I saw last week from Juwan Johnson. Everybody wants to know if Caden Durham's going to play. I think he's going to play. I think he's still listed as questionable. They're going to bring this thing up to game time, I think, with him and his ankle sprain. But I really liked what Juwan Johnson showed us last week between the run and the pass. I think they were pretty efficient running the ball when he was in there. I think he had 44 or 45 yards on 8 carries, and another 35 or another 14, I believe, on a catch. But he's been the only guy that they've really been able to get involved in both the run and the pass. And I think he's somebody that can really kind of open up this offense if he gets more opportunities, and I certainly believe he will this weekend against Ole Miss. So my other thing, yeah, go for it.
No, I was gonna say you touched on the turnovers. Correct correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't LSU lose the turnover battle at Clemson?
Yeah, well, they
Because
had
you
the
had the
one
Bauer
fumble.
Sharp
They had the
fumble,
one
and then you had
fumble.
the Chris Hilton fumble.
They had the one Chris Hilton fumble, and I believe that was their only
I
turnover.
thought Bauer Sharp fumbled too.
Oh, that's right. Bauer Sharp did fumble. Yeah, so they had the two first half
And I know
fumbles. Yeah,
Mansour Delane picked off Klubnik.
yeah.
But
I
if
think
I'm
that
not
was it.
mistaken, LSU lost that turnover battle, right?
Yeah, yeah, they did. They lost it, I think,
Okay,
and
okay. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think that's very this defense is capable of overcoming that too, right? Because those two
Yeah.
fumbles there by LSU in the first half, they really didn't lead to anything for Clemson. They had the field goal that they were able to hold them down to with Bauer Sharp, and then the Chris Hilton fumble came at the end of the first half where LSU just really needed to get some points, and they just weren't able to scrape together any points there. But yeah, I think probably for me with the run game, getting back to the offense here, I really think that there's going to be an opportunity to run the ball against this Ole Miss defense. Like I think that if LSU is improving the way that they say they are and the way that they believe they are, Ole Miss is allowing 190 yards a game on the ground. Like they are dead last in the SEC in rushing yards. And my whole thing is like if you can't do it this week against Ole Miss, you're just probably not going to be able to do it at all. And I think you really want to not have that established this weekend. Like I really think if you're able to go in there and show that you can have some semblance of a run game that can complement what you want to do with Garrett Nussmeier and the passing offense, then I think that's just a really easy way to see success in this game. I'm curious though, like what are your thoughts on the run game for LSU offensively and how
I
they
think
can?
Lane. I think I'm not putting as much of an emphasis on the run game. My emphasis for the run game in this one is Garrett Nussmeier has to make a couple of plays with his legs.
Yeah.
And then Joe Sloan and the rest of the LSU offensive brain trust has to help the offense up by getting some runs in some non-traditional ways. I said that going into Clemson, the way you get the ball to Xavier Thomas, Barry and Brown, Aaron Anderson, some jet screens, uh, some various ways to try to get them the ball because you know, I'm a little less hesitant to fully just jump on Jawan Johnson's cape and ride it right now. I'm I just need to see it against somebody that's not Southeastern, you
Yeah.
know,
Very
and
fair.
I think he's dependable enough to where he can give you some stuff. I don't know if you can get the run game going though without a healthy Caden Durham because I totally expect. I mean, look, if you're Ole Miss and you don't stack the box, something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Okay, because you're giving up 200 yards a game. You've got one of the lowest producing output run games coming at you to where you can't let that, if you let and I believe LSU, if I'm not mistaken, is 15th in the league in rushing, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
You can't let the 15th ranked team in the league come in your house in a game like this and run the ball on you.
Yeah.
If you
I
do
think,
that, to me that looks like lack of preparation and lack of game planning because the if LSU is going to beat you, I think you make them beat you. You have to make them beat you with their best part of their game, and
yeah,
that's their passing.
I get that.
And so that's where I can. That's where I kind of am on the running game, and that's why I lean so much more to Nussmeyer and the receivers
Yeah.
in this one.
I
I
think
just think that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think just before we get to the Nussmeier and receivers thing, because I do think it's important here to mention, like, I think what I'm trying to get at more than anything is, I don't think LSU needs to go out there and run for 150 yards or anything like that to win this game. I think something that we heard from Brian Kelly on Thursday in his last press conference before this game, they just want to see efficient running from this team, like when it's needed. If a lane opens up on 3rd and 2 for Garrett Nussmeier on a rollout pass or something, and he sees it, he's got to take it and go get that first down. Like, just don't force the pass down the field. Go get the 2 yards, go get the first down, extend the drive. Because the thing that LSU's really had some trouble with here, and kudos to Wilson Alexander, the advocate, for pointing this out to me, and I went back and looked at all the games. LSU's average third down to distance these first 4 games has been really rough. I mean, they've 7.2, 8.1, 8 yards, 8.5 yards. Those are the average down to distance here over the first 4 games of the year on third down. Like they've just been way behind the chains on third down. And you're not able to. I think against good teams, you're just not going to be able to consistently convert on those, which is why you've seen their third down conversion rate so poor at times this year. So I think it's really important to establish some semblance of a run game to where you're not getting behind the chains and you're not putting yourself in really, poor, second and long, third and long situations. Certainly penalties, attribute to that as well. And LSU's been a pretty high penalty team on the pre-snaps in particular. They have, I think, 15 pre-snap penalties over their first 4 games. You got to cut all that stuff out too. I think that you have to play a pretty clean game and you have to be an efficient running team this weekend against Ole Miss and really run when it matters most. I think is probably the bigger point that I wanted to make with the run game. But you mentioned the passing game. I do think this is going to be a great opportunity for LSU to really test Ole Miss in the secondary. LSU has or Ole Miss has a familiar face back there in the secondary that I'm sure LSU is very familiar with. They have a couple guys that I think have held up okay. Just in talking with a couple people at Ole Miss, that they feel like the secondary's held up all right, but they really haven't faced a quarterback or a passing offense like this yet this year. So I think LSU is going to be aggressive. I think they're going to try to get the ball down the field a little bit more, especially if Garrett Nussmeier is healthy. And the one guy I want to see make a few plays in this game is Nick Anderson. Like, I think he's the guy in waiting that has had all the potential in the world to be a really great option at receiver, to really put this thing over the top from a passing offense perspective. And I think a part of his game they just haven't been able to utilize is the downfield game because they just haven't been able to air it out that much with Nussmeier yet. So I think he's somebody that could get involved in this game plan and be pretty efficient. Obviously, you've got Aaron Anderson, Barryon Brown, Xavier Thomas, who are your kind of your core three there, or have been your core three to this point. I'm curious though, just from a passing game perspective, you touched on it a little bit. Getting more perimeter oriented, getting the ball on the outside. Just what is it that you want to see from this passing game in particular this weekend?
Well, I want to see Nick Anderson catch the ball.
Yeah, that's true.
You
Yeah,
mentioned him, and he needs to, he needs to bounce back from last week, and catch the ball. I think having Trades Green back is going to be that's going to be a big, a, a lot of potential mismatches depending on how Ole Miss, depending on how Ole Miss combats that. I'd love to see some jump balls with Trades Green and Sage Ryan going at it. Just because you're talking about a five 10, 5'11" defensive back. I don't think that Ole Miss has a Mansour Delane type on in its secondary that you can look at and say, like if LSU was playing a Trades Green type of player, I think you have some players in the LSU secondary to you say, okay, we're going to be giving up some height and some athleticism, but we don't just absolutely hate this mismatch.
yeah,
We'll take it. And so it'd be interesting to see how he is incorporated into this game, and then also how much LSU runs two tight end because the last game against Southeastern, you didn't have Trades Green, and so you didn't have situations where you had the two tight ends on the field. You had the three wide receivers on the field for a lot of the time, and so how are they going to balance that?
yeah,
How are they going to do that balancing act? Because if you got Sharp and Green on the field at the same time, you're not going to have Brown, Anderson, and Thomas.
yeah,
So it'd be interesting to see how that works out. And look, no, make no bones about it. This is a big game. I think this is a big game for Joe Sloan because this is a game right here that you're going into it knowing that you're going to have to score some points. You're going into it knowing that you're facing one of the worst run defenses in the league, and you haven't been able to get the run game going for the majority of the season so far, and so that puts a lot of pressure. I think that can put a lot of pressure on your offensive coordinator, and I just hope that we don't see a situation that we've seen sometimes in the past to where it's like come hell or high water, we're going to get the run game going today.
yeah.
If we can't run the ball on Ole Miss, then we're not going to run the ball on anybody this year. I hope they don't have that mindset. I hope they
I,
don't get that mindset.
yeah, and I think
And because if they do get that mindset, then that's going to really, I think, take your offense and kind of put it in a phone booth.
yeah,
And you want to be able to utilize all 52 yards of width of that field and all 100 yards of the length. You know,
mhm,
you've got to utilize the entire field to get LSU's players in space. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic for me is how much two tight end do we see relative to one tight end? And if it is only one tight end, is it more Bauer Sharp? Is it more Trades Green? So that'd be I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic in the passing game. And then you got to protect the edges. You got
yeah,
to protect the edges. Ole Miss is going to come after Weston Davis. He's been the weak link on the offensive line. LSU is going to come at him. How much chipping do you have to do? How much are you having to keep your tight end in to help in those situations? I think that's another one that when I talk about the passing game and getting the ball to your playmakers, you can't do that if you're not protecting up front,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. Look,
And so.
I think to your point about Joe Sloan and just how important a game this is for him, I also think it's extremely important for Garrett Nussmeier. Like I think this is a kind of game here where if Nussmeier is healthy, and it sounds like he's getting even healthier than he was a week ago, then he should go out and absolutely just be slinging the ball around. Like he should be really aggressive with his throws, I think, this weekend. And, not to the point where you're putting the ball in really risky situations. I mean, aggressive as in throwing the ball down the field, getting it to those speedy playmakers that you have at your disposal. I think he's going to be, he hasn't had the start of the season I think many of us thought he would have. I think this is a great week to potentially start to change that tune a little bit, and certainly when you go on the road to a hostile environment, a place that you know well. I think having that veteran quarterback, having somebody that hopefully is not going to put the ball in harm's way, is going to be something that he really has to pay attention to. And to your point, like if the offensive line is still struggling, if there's still opportunities there for Ole Miss to get after Nussmeier, I think he has to have the pocket awareness to either get rid of the ball, accept the zero, or take the sack or whatever it is. Just live to fight another day. Like I think that's a big thing with Nuss, and
Throw the ball away.
throw it away. Yeah, yeah.
Don't take the sack. Throw the ball away.
Yeah, throw it away. Zero is better than the sack. Zero is better than a turnover, or putting the ball in an aggressive spot that could lead to a turnover kind of thing. Like I think the offense has to play a pretty clean game. Like that's the one thing, because I think Ole Miss is going to get stops in this game. I think the offense is going to have its times here where they're not able to move the ball up and down the field and get into scoring position. It's just what you do on those opportunities, what you do get to score. They're going to have their quarterback really step up in those situations, and I think he will. I think Nussmeier is a good quarterback. I think he's much better than what he's shown to this point in the season, and this is going to be a big game for him to prove a lot of naysayers wrong, I think.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And I almost feel like if LSU is going to win this game, Garrett Nussmeier needs to have that Heisman Trophy campaign performance
Yeah,
that we haven't seen yet.
yeah,
And I'm not counting and I'm not counting last week, against Southeastern.
yeah.
Just looking at strictly looking at the P4 G5 teams that they played so far. He hasn't had that. He hasn't had that performance that to where you look and say he could be the top pick in the draft,
He
like we
was
were hearing over the summer.
he
Over
was
the summer we
okay.
were hearing that type
Yeah,
that stuff. Like, oh, he could be the number one overall pick. This is your Heisman Trophy front runner and things like that. And since the season started, and obviously taking into consideration his injury and stuff, he just hasn't. He hasn't performed like that, and he hasn't been put in the situations to perform like that either because he hasn't needed to.
yeah.
Now, I think this weekend he's going to be put in that situation to where he has to play like that. He
Yes.
has to be that dude. He
Very
has
good
to be
point.
that
Yes.
Joe Burrow. He has to be that Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
And so, this is the week right here for me that, you know, you can't have one of those quote unquote or just a good game managing performance.
Yeah.
You gotta have a game altering performance, I think, if you're gonna go in and beat a top 10 team on the road.
You got to have a step up from Clemson, and I think
Yes, sir.
after the I thought he played well in the Clemson game, and I think if that Barryon Brown touchdown catch had been called a catch, then that
You look
obviously
at
would
it
have
a
made
little bit different.
it would have made his game
Yeah.
look a lot better. But yeah, I think he needs to have some of those kinds of moments in this game against Ole Miss. To your point, and we'll see. I think he has the talent to be able to go out and do that, and I think he has the playmakers around him to go out and do that. I do want to touch on just a few quick, kind of injury things before we head out of here, and get our predictions in. But it sounds like, like you mentioned, Trey Green's going to play. Wes Weeks is going to play. Caden Durham is questionable for LSU. That'll be a game time decision. I'm be very interested to see what happens there. in his performance. And then the news we heard last night, which is very unfortunate, but Gabriel Relaford's going to be out for the season with the torn rotator cuff. I think you're going to have to see Patrick Payton, Jack Pyburn, Jamari Butler. I think what kind of opportunities open up for Dylan Carpenter or Kalaj Cobbins as potentially being a fourth edge rusher for LSU throughout the course of the season. Those guys are going to all have to step up with Relaford out, because Relaford didn't have huge stats, I think, on the stat sheet here early in the season, but he was affecting the game when he was in there. And I thought he had a really nice performance against Florida in particular, of getting after Lagway and making him uncomfortable. So all those guys are going to have to step up on the edge rushers positions. I think from a unavailability standpoint, DJ Chester is going to miss the first half because of the targeting call against Southeastern. That's a piece that I don't think should be overlooked completely, because he's been kind of your swing offensive lineman in the first half for LSU here. He's going to have to miss the first half, so you just knock on wood that nobody gets hurt or nothing happens to any of your linemen, and you're able to survive the first half without having to go to DJ Chester or somebody else that would have to step up in the position without him. So I think he's somebody that you're gonna have to take into consideration this weekend. Anything on any of that stuff, Sonny? Anything like from a defensive end perspective, edge rusher perspective, that you think those guys are going to have to obviously step up and play better?
The thing about Relaford is that Relaford gives you a little bit more, I think, than Jack Pyburn and Patrick Payton give you. Got a little more girth to him, got a little more size to him, got a little more strength, to where I think he did a really good job of holding the edge,
Yeah,
of really doing his job on that side of the ball. And a lot of times, when your defensive ends do that, they go unnoticed because that's what they're supposed to do.
yeah,
But let that running back get the edge, and and then it becomes a glaring issue. So I think Jamari Butler is going to play a big role here.
yeah,
I think that, granted, it was Southeastern, but he played really well last week. I think he's going to have to step up, and he's going to really have to have he's going to have to not only have a good game, but he's going to have to be able to give you more than you've
yeah,
asked of him so far.
yeah,
He's going to now. I think you're going to probably, the way these two teams are going to go up and down the field, and with potential stops and stuff. I mean, I would not be surprised at all if this was a game that you looked and you saw, you know, 13 drives,
yeah,
team, running 80 plays, 75 plays, 78 plays. And so I think Butler's going to have to be able to give you a lot more, and how he holds up. I think Jacoby and Guillory's going to have to give you more this week. How much are you really going to be able to use Bernard Gooden? I think is going to be interesting to see, just because how is he going to hold up against the run at 270, 275 pounds? And, Dominic McKinley, Ahmad Bro, all those guys are going to have to play some increased snaps. So, um, from the
yeah,
defensive end, from the perspective of, who's going to step up for Relaford, though, I think it falls on Butler. I
yeah.
think it falls on. What you going with? I put my prediction in. I think LSU. I went 34-21. I stuck with it. I said it earlier in the week when we did our
Wow.
first pod. I still think that, I think that the two quarterback system is going to benefit LSU, because I don't think Trinidad Chambliss or Austin Simmons has faced a defense like this. I think that both are going to have some issues at times, and that's going to force Lane to play some musical chairs. And I think that could play well, and that could play right into Blake Baker's hands. And, I just think the LSU defense is going to, I think the LSU defense is something that Ole Miss hasn't seen yet. And if they're able to cut out those chunk plays, like I said, on the ground, I think LSU should leave with, like I said, I don't want to say a convincing win. I think the score, if the score 34-21, if that holds up, I think it's a closer game than
Yeah.
the score would indicate.
Yeah, no, I have LSU winning this game too. I have it a little bit closer. I went back and forth on it a little bit throughout the week, but the thing I just keep coming back to is I think this defense is legit. Like I think they're going to be a really good defense all year, no matter who they go up against. And to your point, I think Ole Miss not having faced a defense like this is a little bit more of a talking point than LSU's defense maybe not facing an offense like Ole Miss's to this point, because I think there's just enough veteran presence there, enough guys who have played a lot of football. The way that they have come out this year on defense, just hitting the ground running from game one, has been just super impressive in terms of just their communication, their fundamentals, the consistent pressure they're applying in the front seven, the consistent coverage they've had in the back end of the defense as well. They're just a well-oiled machine right now defensively, and I don't think I don't think that side of the ball is going to allow them to lose the game. I had this more in the 28-24 LSU range. I have this a little bit closer because I do think the offense is going to have a tough time getting to 30 plus. Maybe the defense gets a big turnover and kind of helps the offense out for, one of those scoring positions or scoring possessions. And I think just from an offensive standpoint, you've got to be aggressive, but you've got to be smart. And because you cannot go into this game and give them free yards for penalties. You can't give them extra possessions through turnovers. I think if the offense goes out there and plays a clean game, plays an aggressive game, especially in the passing angle, can run the ball efficiently, I think they can put up enough points to walk out of Oxford with a really impressive win, to your point. And that would set them up, obviously, for some really a really great opportunity to be a kind of the put themselves in a lead position to be a college football playoff team. Like this is a big swing game for both these teams in terms of, can they make the college football playoff? What does that road to that look like? And I think, whichever team wins this game is obviously going to feel a lot better about their opportunity and their chances here leaving this game. So I think that's pretty much all I've got. I think, we've got our predictions in, we've done everything, and it's going to be exciting. I'm heading out to Oxford this weekend. I'll be there. We'll have all of your coverage. Throughout the entirety of the weekend, certainly on game day and then the days to follow. So make sure you guys are staying tuned with us and keeping up with all the news. With that, he's Sonny Ship. I'm Glenn West, and thanks for listening and watching to the Go 24/7 podcast.